A very good evening to all of you. Many thanks for tuning in. Now, as you all know, November is the National Epilepsy Awareness Month. We at Times Now, in association with Sanofi, take great pride in discussing epilepsy, its triggers, its treatment, and most importantly, how each one of us with our everyday gestures can better support and be more inclusive towards people living with epilepsy. And joining me on the panel today, I have with me cricketing legend Jonty Rhodes. Now, while all of us know Jonty as one of the greatest fielders of all time and the first South African cricketer to take 100 catches, not many of us are aware that Jonty had epilepsy as a child. Now, Mr. Rhodes, we really appreciate you being with us here today and also supporting the cause. We also have with us Dr. Veena Kalra, Director, the Child Center, New Delhi, formerly Professor and Head Pediatrics, AIMS, New Delhi, and Senior Consultant and Pediatric Neurologist, Apollo Hospital, New Delhi. Dr. Dinesh Nayak, who's a Director, Senior Consultant Neurologist and Hepatologist, Neurosciences, Glen Eagles Global Health City, Chennai, and Dr. Joy Desai, who's Director, Neurology, Jaslok Hospital and Research Center, Mumbai, and Secretary, Mumbai Epilepsy Foundation. A big thank you to all of you for joining us here on Times Now. I'm going to start this discussion with Jonty. Jonty, tell us about managing epilepsy in your childhood. Was it a challenge? Also tell us about the support system you had and how it helped in your overall development.
Well, thank you firstly for having me again. It's on this amazing webinar and for such a good cause. And I think it's interesting because my childhood, I think, would have been difficult for my parents, whether I had epilepsy or not, because I'm one of 3 boys and we had so much energy. I don't know how they kept control of us. We were just everywhere at once. So it was not a case of, oh, this kid has got epilepsy, there's something wrong with them. I'm really fortunate that both my parents were teachers and they also understood, because very little was known about epilepsy. This is now back in the sort of mid-70s, 1970s, when I was a young boy, 6 or 7 years old, and I kept getting concussed very easily. So if I bumped my head on the playground, running into other kids as we were playing, or climbing trees with my brothers and I fell out, I would often lose consciousness and wake up vomiting and things like that. So my parents eventually were informed that I had a mild case of epilepsy, and it was called reflexive epilepsy, which meant I need to have a bump on my head. So I never had a seizure or a convulsion walking down the street. As long as I looked after putting my head in the right or wrong place, I should be fine. And my parents, as I said, because they were teachers, they also understood the fact that my friends and peers at school might consider me to be different or might bully me or tease me if they perceived me to be different. So my mother and my father really encouraged me to just be a little boy and do as much as possible other than play rugby, which was for me quite difficult because my father was a rugby player. I went to an all-boys school where rugby was a big part of that school. But fortunately, so were all the other sports as well, like cricket and hockey and tennis and soccer. So I didn't feel too left out. But as I said before, I think with or without epilepsy, the 3 Rhodes boys would have been a handful for my parents.
Right, Jonty, talking about childhood epilepsy, I would like to bring in Dr. Veena Kalra on this. Dr. Kalra, what advice would you like to give to parents of children who have epilepsy?
Taking a cue from what Jonty said, the first and most important thing for parents is to recognize that your child is a little different in some ways and has episodes of something that's different, either in terms of voluntary movement or in terms of consciousness or in terms of behavior. And this is something that should tell them to solicit an opinion to see whether the child has epileptic spasms. Right. This, I would say that the roots of epilepsy as a pediatrician all very frequently begin at birth. So I would like to warn parents that having a safe birth without hypoxia at birth, without low blood sugar for the brain at birth, not having the brain injured by bilirubin, jaundice, and infections is of very crucial and paramount importance to prevention of epilepsy, which is a very, very crucial thing. Similarly, childhood trauma, accidents frequently go on to produce seizures. So this is something I would want to give as first tip, that prevent your child from things that can precipitate epilepsy later in life, maybe months or even years later. The second thing is to recognize that what is a seizure and what is not a seizure. And if you have any doubts, solicit medical help, because it's very crucial to know that everything that moves is not epilepsy, and epilepsy is not always associated with movement. So you must have a good diagnosis of epilepsy that parents must get.
Right, Dr. Veena Kalra, right.
Thirdly, the parents have really to make sure that they accept the diagnosis, understand the disease, partner with the physician, partner with their child, so as the family works in tandem with the medical help, so that the disease can be taken good care of in childhood and not go on to secondary disabilities.
Right, Dr. Kalra, as you were talking about identifying the disease and, and also about seizures, I would like to bring in Dr. Dinesh Nayak on this. Dr. Nayak, if you could explain to our viewers, like if a person suffers a seizure all of a sudden, what's the first thing that the passerby or the eyewitness should do, and what should be the first aid in such a case?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's a great privilege to be with Jonty here and with my colleagues. Well, I think, you see, the point is that when somebody has a convulsion and, falls down, it's very frightening. So the first thing to do is actually the passerby, if you come across a person who's fallen down and, started convulsing, is to gather your wits. That's the first thing. So just be calm. That's the first thing, and then make others to be calm. The second thing is to just look around the environment and see whether, there's something dangerous nearby. Supposing it's in the kitchen and, there may be something hot there nearby, a hot cooker or something like that. So you've got to remove the patient or the person who's having the seizure a little to the safer side. Ensure that the head is protected. You can keep a soft, something like a cloth or something like that under the head, just to ensure that the head is not, getting banged into the ground. The convulsion, when it happens, if you have protected the head from hitting the ground and removing the danger from nearby, and then you have to wait for the convulsion to end. And one should not intervene during the time of the active jerking of the limbs. That's the most important thing. Because in our anxiety, we try to do something, try to restrain the person from from getting the jerks. That's not going to work. It's going to actually be more harmful. So, but the most important thing is that you got to get into action when these jerks end. That's the time when the muscles become loose and all the accumulated froth or the saliva in the mouth, that starts getting into the lung, even if you allow it to be there in that mouth at the time. So one has to then turn the person to one or the other side. That's what is called the recovery position, to the right or the left side, and then clear up the secretions from the mouth. If you do this, you're protected the person. Never give anything into the mouth. Never put anything. For example, the people try to feed, people try to make them drink water. All these things are not allowed, because that can be more harmful than harmless. So these are the two things that we have to do.
Right, right. Dr. Nayak, if you could also talk about some of the myths and the stigma which is associated with epilepsy, and that makes it difficult for people to come and take the right treatment at the right time.
Absolutely. I think this is the most important thing. We now have an icon here, Jonty, and, he's broken through those barriers, and he has achieved so much. So you don't need any more than Jonty Rhodes to inspire people with epilepsy. So that's what it is. So the basic point is, unfortunately, even in the 21st century, with all the advancements in medicine, we still are beset with a lot of myths about epilepsy. And I'll just go through a few of them. Many of us consider, I represent the society. So many of us think that epilepsy is a mental disease. It's not. People think that it's hereditary. No, maybe 1 or 2% is hereditary. Now 95% no. sometimes people think that it's contagious. It can spread from one person to another. That's another unfortunate myth. Some people believe that it's because of our ancestors' sins. So we suffer for something that has happened in the past. Many people think that you can't lead a fulfilling life, can't get married, can't get educated. And this unfortunately results in underperformance and a lot of social stigma that is attached to this condition. And therefore, a lot of people suffer. Epilepsy is just another medical condition. It's just that, the seizure happens because there's an excessive abnormal electrical discharge coming from one area of the brain. It's as much as any other condition like asthma or, it is a condition, it's a medical condition basically. So there is enough treatment for almost all of us. And most of the patients with epilepsy can lead very fulfilling normal lives. So it's our duty to bust all these myths and bring these people out of the shadows and get them into the mainstream. That's going to be our responsibility.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Nayak, for busting those myths, and of course also assuring, reassuring our viewers that, epilepsy is just a medical condition and you can lead a normal life along with treatment. Now, let me go across to Jonty now. Jonty, you're an international level cricketer. How did your peers and the people in and around you react or behave with you during your cricketing days? Did they support you in your journey towards achieving your goals?
Well, it's very interesting because without support, I've always been in a team game, whether it was football or hockey or cricket, and we rely heavily on our teammates. And because I've had the condition, because I've had epilepsy, I've really appreciated the fact that everybody played a role, not just my parents, in ensuring that I could get out and achieve the goals that I had set for myself. And to a state where in South Africa in the early 80s, we never used to have cricket helmets in the country. People would, if you played hardball cricket, you wore a cap. Nowadays, because of all the concussion that goes on, most cricketers will wear a helmet. But I even had the sports shop in my small town of Pietermaritzburg having to order a cricket helmet from the UK, from England, because in South Africa there were no helmets available. So it wasn't just my teammates, it wasn't just my parents. It was people in the sports industry who were prepared to go the extra mile and help me out, because obviously I had some ability. I was showing some ability already at age 13 and 14, but for me to be able to go on and play cricket at a higher level, I needed to have this helmet. So I'm just grateful that it's not just your parents, it's not just the caregivers, and it's important in a work environment, in a school environment. And I think what Dr. Nayak spoke about earlier, I mean, if we are is so much knowledge at our fingertips. And a lot of these stigmas are just because people don't understand. And we're often a little bit afraid of what we don't understand fully. So my parents were really good at not making a big issue about the fact that I had epilepsy, but also making people aware that if something did happen, this is what you have to do. And I think when we're armed with information and knowledge, it makes us more confident in our responses and in the support that we can give, which is essential. We can arm ourselves with this really important information that it takes a lot of the stigmas away and allows a person with the condition to fulfill their full their abilities and their goals and dreams.
Right, Jonty, it is very essential to have a good support system and people who are there to help you with, and it can take you really far. And of course, you have set that example for us. And I would like to bring in Dr. Joy Desai on this. Dr. Joy, now we know that people with epilepsy can have good careers and can hold jobs. And, we have Jonty Rhodes, who is amongst us as an example. But if you could also tell us, is there any kind of work that people with epilepsy should avoid?
Yeah, that's an important question. But at the outset, you need to understand that a good 70% of people with seizures or epilepsy are usually well controlled with appropriate therapy, and they can function like any normal individual. It's only a very small number, that little 25-30%, who may have recurring occasional seizures despite medication. And they're the ones who are perceived to have challenges in their functionality. My own conviction is that most people they are capable and they can do any job except for those where there is potential danger either to themselves or to the public at large. So flying a commercial airliner or being a driver for a high-speed train, or maybe even in an environment like a swimming instructor or with heavy machinery. Those are potential scenarios where if perchance there was to be a breakthrough seizure, it could endanger either the individual or people around them. So those are the occupations that warrant staying away from. Having said that, it's a very individual thing, and I recommend most patients to actually discuss with their doctor as to what are the things they could do and what are the things they could not do. And I did mention in the beginning that a good 70% do well on medication. I personally am a hiker, trekker. I had a patient who was on medication doing well. She came to me and said, "Doc, need to convince my wife. I want to climb Stoke Kangri." As you know, Stoke Kangri is the highest mountain in Ladakh at an altitude of 20,000. And once we had a group discussion and the patient had remained seizure-free for a period of time. So just with an addition of an additional thing to decrease altitude sickness, could actually go and climb Stoke Kangri and send me a photograph from the summit. So there are many individuals who can actually follow their likes, their passions, and their occupational needs. It's individual, but I think we need to understand that they are as capable as anybody else.
Right, Dr. Desai, they're saying that it is very case to case as far as the career prospects for people with epilepsy is concerned. Yes. I would like to bring in Dr. Veena Kalra. Dr. Kalra, if you could, tell us, in India, what do you think we can do to ensure that epilepsy patients in India get the needed support in their lives, both at schools and also in the social system, to ensure that they achieve, of course, great heights?
Thank you very much. It's a very important generic question for the entire population at large, not only the patients, but also their families. Now, this question, I think, has to be attended at 3 levels. The first is policy and political mandate to support these children. In terms of policy, the first thing is to recognize that epilepsy per se is not a disability, it's a condition. It can be a disability when it's associated with comorbidities. And therefore, we have to give place for epilepsy as such in the community in a normal way, in terms of schooling, in terms of college life, in terms of jobs, in terms of careers, and the large majority would fall well within that range. For the small proportion that has either a very recurrent epilepsy or has associated comorbidities, that's where the policies to support them become more handy, because then you need a system that will support them financially, that will support them legally, that would support them in terms of their daily life positioning and in enjoying benefits in case they happen to be unable to take care of themselves eventually. So these are policy decisions that we need to do. According to the Disability Act of 2016, epilepsy has not been included in disability as such, but there's a condition called chronic neurological disabilities, in which epilepsy with other comorbidity is taken care of under this policy. So this has been a sea change ever since 2016. So there has been a very positive step in moving towards helping the families and lives of epileptic patients. Right. Then in addition to this, I think it's important to transfer this policy onto civil society, onto schools, onto colleges, that these children are not prevented from joining school just because they have an epileptic system. The school has to gear up. The principal, the teachers, the school system has to gear up to be able to have handle an odd seizure that a child may have in school. It should not disempower him from following normal education in a normal school, in a normal way, along with peers. I think that's extremely important. So the civil society, the schools, the educational system has to gear up and come up to level with this. Then is the financial aspect that it has to be taken care of. There are, we know, understand more financial implications on the lives of families with an epileptic child. So there are systems that they do get benefits from the income tax. So that provided they fill in the right certification and they show in their expenditures. So these families are helped. That's a very positive step that the government offers to the really needy people. Then I think it's very important that career discriminations should not come in for most of the people, except as already mentioned, that where it becomes a challenge, it's so, but in the large majority, it's perfectly fine for them to follow a career of their choice. Most of all, important thing I would say is in this handling, it's the family that has to rise to the occasion to understand whatever is available, to be empowered with knowledge, what is offered by the system and the government, because ultimately knowledge is supreme. If you have the knowledge where to get the benefits, you will get them. So I think the population at large must have access to this knowledge. It must be on public platforms where they can be empowered with this knowledge to take benefit for their wards. I think that's a very, very important thing.
Right, of course, Dr. Kalra, awareness is the key and to making the society more inclusive. And I would like to bring in Dr. Joy Desai on this. Dr. Joy Desai, what is your advice to the leaders, hiring managers and colleagues on being more inclusive towards a colleague who has epilepsy?
Yes, that's a very, very vital thing. And this entire discussion is leading up to it. I did mention that most people who have seizures don't necessarily have seizures too often. And even the ones who have seizures frequently need to be gainfully employed. So it's important for employers to understand, to accept, and to bring them into their fold. This could be done in numerous ways. And often, if there is someone who is an employee and who has filled in a form which says that they have epilepsy and they're on treatment, it may be useful to get an opinion from the treating doctor, which really gives them what is their entire burden of what they're suffering from. And once that comes through, one can understand that, yes, this person has seizures, but is under medication, is capable of doing the job that they have been assigned. And that acceptance and the ability to allow them to be taken into the fold of all the others who don't have medication. We accept people who have diabetes. We accept people who have hypertension. They are also biologically vulnerable. So I think the same umbrella of acceptance, understanding, and embracing the fact that they are normal individuals who deserve normal rights. I think that's the important thing.
Right, right, Dr. Desai, acceptance is the key to creating a more inclusive environment for patients with epilepsy. Let me now get in a word from Jonty Rhodes. Jonty, what is your message to the people who have joined us on this program today?
Well, I think a couple of things. Firstly, it does require a team effort, just like the team has come here today together to spread this message and this vital information. Without my parents, without the support of my teammates, and I said the cricketing community, the sports community at large, I would not be sitting here today having had a successful cricketing career. I think secondly as well is that because I couldn't follow in my father's footsteps and play a contact sport, a physical contact sport like rugby, instead of focusing on the things that I couldn't do, what I did and what my parents ensured that I did was that I focused on the things that I could do. And that allowed me. And the most amazing thing is that because I couldn't play rugby, I had to focus more on football and hockey in the winter. And those two sports, along with tennis, made me the fielder that I was as a cricketer for South Africa. So if I'd continued with rugby and I didn't have epilepsy, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today because I wouldn't have been the fielder that had got the skills from all those other sports. So it's not about focusing on what you can't do. It's about when you understand your limits, you can overcome them. And that's just a message that my personal, and I still get goosebumps, and I think of the support from my parents and teammates. Without that support and without that focus on, hey, I can't do that, that's we know these are the things that I can do. And let's pour your passion and your energy into that. And that is why I'm sitting here today.
Right, Jonty, that's a very important message for all our viewers there. Focus on what you can do and not what you can't do. And with that, I would like to wrap this discussion. Thank you all for giving us such an insight into the world of people who have epilepsy. Now, it's been a great discussion. And what we should all remember is 3 key points. This National Epilepsy Awareness Month. Let us all try and understand this disease better. Be well informed. Support a child in school or people around us who are suffering from epilepsy at the workplace, and be compassionate and inclusive. Now, they are just like you and me. With proper treatment, you can live a happy and a successful life. And also, I would like to say that Sanofi is reaching out to people all across India through various modes throughout November, National Epilepsy Month, to ensure more and more people are aware and can support, empathize, and be inclusive towards people living with epilepsy. And for more information on epilepsy in 12 regional languages, you can log into the Facebook page Dare to Know Epilepsy, share it with your family and friends.